How are y'all doing? Yeah, happy to be here today. Here on behalf of AJF Home Inspections. How many of y'all utilize AJF? Okay, a few of you. Hopefully more will after today. Just to give a little bit of a background, I at one point in time in my life was a realtor, so I come in peace, understanding a little bit of the real estate side, because if I know anything that's true, when you as a realtor hear the word solar or solar sales rep, that's usually a trigger. And then for solar and solar sales reps, typically when they say I'm going to talk to my realtor, that's a trigger for them. So didn't know this would necessarily be my life goal, but it is to help build a bridge between real estate and solar. Just because the way that solar is evolving, it is not going anywhere. And actually in some cases with a new bill that was recently passed, it's probably in some instances going to get more difficult, and I'll explain why that is. So my goal here today is just to give you the right information. So normally the way I like to start this out is what is the solar industry and how does it actually work? For those that aren't a part of the industry, typically, talking about kilowatts and kilowatt hours and gigawatts and all that, it's a different language. And so I'll explain how most solar transactions have transpired over the last 10 to 15 years. Are you still paying the electric company for power every single month? You're not only losing money, you're investing in someone else's future, not your own. Bright Home Energy has over 400 5-star reviews and over 100 5-star reviews on the BBB. That means real homeowners just like you are already making the switch with quality and peace of mind. We are the preferred solar installer for SolarEdge Technologies in Arizona. Not a title that was given, but a title that was earned through quality, structure, and peace of mind. As a NABCEP certified solar installer and an APS qualified technology installer, your solar installation with Bright Home Energy is not good, it's top tier. So the choice is yours. You can either keep paying your utility company every month, making them rich, or you can make the switch to solar and start investing in your future today. And you'll probably see why there's a lot of confusion. So normally what happens with, I'd say about 75% of companies or solar transactions is, typically it's started by a salesperson. Whether they knock on somebody's door, whether somebody inquires online, calls in, doesn't matter. Typically the sale is made in the home. And one of the, I think, detriments to the solar industry and how it was operating for a very long time was you would have a solar salesperson, and they were a part of a solar sales company, right? They would make the sale however they made the sale, and then they would pass that customer off to an installation company who was a completely different company, had no idea what was said in the home. They just received a contract to go ahead and install it. Usually on the other side of that, there's a financing company, whether it's being purchased or leased, okay? And then not to make it even more complicated, but then you have the manufacturer of the solar panels, the manufacturer of the inverter, and all of these companies transpire to make that one solar transaction go. And that's why there's so much room for misinformation, false promises. If you think about it, it's one of the negatives in the space, but if you're a real estate agent, if you're a lender, if you sell insurance, you have to have some sort of credential, education, training. With solar, the way it has been is somebody at 18 years, it doesn't matter if they're 18, 40, 50, 90, if they have a pulse and they want to sell solar, they could sell a $50,000 to $100,000 solar system to somebody with zero training, zero credentials. Yes, there's paperwork that the customer signs that, truth in lending and all of that, but really there's no guardrails set up. So people can be promised one thing, they get installed and they're committed to that one thing they were promised for 25 years, even if that one thing was the wrong information. And so I'll kind of get into a little bit more in depth, but I know the biggest heartache is transferability, lease, ownership, and financing. So first things first, you all probably run into this from time to time. As solar salespeople, just knowing how the industry works, is a lot of times when the home purchase comes up, like, hey, what if I sell my home? Usually it's, churched up a little bit, where they say, hey, no problem at all. The next person can just take over your payments. Where we were running into problems with leases at different points in time was the homeowner who originally got the lease on their home. They had certain, credit score, DTI, what have you. The next owner that needed to take over that lease to buy the home had to have those same things. And sometimes there were gaps where somebody could not qualify for the solar, but they could qualify for the home. Now they can't get the home because they couldn't qualify for the solar. I will say it has gotten a lot easier to qualify over the last 5 years. Most leasing companies typically say, hey, now if you qualify for the home, you'll qualify for the lease. But if it was sold, 5 years and prior, you might still run into those interesting incidents. In terms of, financing ownership of solar, there's 3 ways to go solar. One, and the most clean and easy way, is if somebody just buys the system outright, right? They purchased it cash. You go to make the transaction, reselling the home. There may be, depending on certain factors, a percentage of price that they attribute to the value of the system. And then the next one is financing and then lease. How many of you recently have ran into a leased system that you were trying to transfer? Okay, what was the experience like? Terrible? Okay, that sounds about right.
I'm trying now, but it's Tesla, and they
Okay.
seem to be really, really, I think so easy so far. It was just really an
Yeah.
application, and then it was sent to title, and and then
Cool.
the buyers filled it out, and I actually couldn't believe how easy it was. I was really
Yeah,
nervous
and that's kind of the disconnect in the solar industry is both of you are right. It's like it's either terrible or it's really easy, and I can't stand up here and say exactly what it's going to be. I will say, and I'm going to send over to Monica after we're done here, sort of a cheat sheet that AJF and I made up of all the different lenders that are still active and have phone numbers for them. Just things to look for, which we'll get into here in a minute. But yeah, it's, solar is just as polarizing as those 2 comments were right there. I will tell you, Tesla is probably the very easiest lease for the customer to take it over, to transfer. So if you run into a Tesla, usually it's an easier process. There's a company called Sonova, which I'll get into, which is terrible.
What we see on the lending
Yeah.
side is we have to get specific documents, and
Sure.
we'll spend hours on the phone
Right.
on hold.
Trying to get a hold. Oh, really? Interesting. Huh. Yeah, a lot of times they only do through email. So Tesla, they do have phone numbers, but you're very hard pressed to get a hold of somebody. So a lot of times with them, I know it's through email. There's even worse ones out there, which I'll go over. So the first thing, somebody buys it outright, that transfer is very easy. If they finance it, same thing. So typically with a financing option that's not a lease for ownership, they have 2 options. Either number 1, that loan can be paid off in the transaction, whether it's by the buyer or the seller or both. Or number 2, they can just take over that loan payment and keep paying it off. And then eventually once it's paid off, they no longer have that bill anymore. And then obviously the third one is the lease, where depending what leasing company is, they look for different criteria. Sometimes very easy, sometimes, and a lot of times it kills deals. And that gets me into the future of solar in Arizona. So a lot of things have changed very dramatically the last 3 to 6 months in solar. So the big beautiful bill that got passed through, that killed the residential tax credit. So one incentive most people had to go solar was if they bought a system cash or finance, they could purchase the system, and then they were able to apply for a 30% tax credit on what they paid for the system. So if they paid, $30,000 for a solar system, when it came to file their taxes the following year, if they had the tax liability for that, they could file for a $9,000 tax credit from the IRS and then $1,000 from the state. So they literally could get a system for 30 grand, but only net out paying $20,000 for it. That is now gone. As of December 31st, that's completely done away with. And what is still going on is the tax credit for leasing companies. What does that mean? That means more people are going to be incentivized now. Really, few of the only ways to go solar currently is to lease a system, which is not necessarily great for the customers. It can be, just depending on the situation, but it's not good for you all moving forward with transferability, and it's not even necessarily great for us. So that's the future. So if you hate leases, well, they're not going anywhere. They're actually going to get more and more popular because the tax incentives are still going to the leasing companies. And the way that works is they call it third-party ownership. So this third party buys the system and holds ownership to it. What they do for the customer is they give them a monthly bill, to pay it off, and then that company files for a tax credit. They depreciate the solar system, and then they own it, okay? So normally, nowadays, a lease is typically 25 years, okay? So pros and cons to that. The con is, it's 25 years, and whoever's in that home has to make that lease payment. It's typically not very advantageous to pay that off early. But some of the pros are, that means all the equipment is warranted for 25 years as well. So that is at least some reassurance that, hey, while that system's operating in that lease, the lease company typically will monitor the system, and they have to make sure it's producing in an optimal amount. And then if anything goes wrong, that customer is covered for 25 years, assuming the lease company is still around. Has anybody ran into a lease, within the last 6 or 12 months where the leasing companies went out of business? You?
I haven't personally, but I called the agency.
Okay. You have? Okay. Yeah, so there's a company called Sonova. So one of the big shakeups over the last few years in the solar industry is, a lot of companies have went out of business. So there was a company here locally called Titan. They were on the Suns Court and different things. Like, they were the largest solar installer in the United States. They went out of business. A lot more installers have as well. That is kind of just like, it's not a good thing, but it's like you can survive that. But where it's started to get really weird is now some of the solar leasing companies have went out of business. So one called SunPower, who had been around forever, they went out of business. And then Sonova, who was another major one, they went out of business. And they're finding it very difficult over the last 3 to 6 months that if you are transferring one of those systems to get a hold of somebody. I know with Sonova, another weird thing that I don't even know how this is legal, but if you run into a Sonova lease, I had a realtor friend from EXP call me about a month ago, and he said, hey, I'm buying this investment property. There's only like $10,000 left on this lease. We're just going to buy it out and essentially take the panels off because we're redoing the whole house. He said, but I ran into a problem where they'll allow us to pay it off, but they won't remove the UCC1 filing. I don't even know how that's legal. That's something I've been hearing as of late. I haven't even been able to get any answers from anybody on how that works. So if you do run into a Sonova lease, that's not a really good situation necessarily to be in, unless the owner just wants to take over the payments and go from there. A few other shifts that are happening in Arizona now, I think this could be for betterment of the home and the system, is you're going to see an uptick in storage. Storage batteries. We're probably one of the leading companies right now with storage in Arizona. What is happening now is people, instead of choosing to go solar and put a solar system on their home, they can actually put a Tesla Powerwall 3 or 2 on their home for about a half to a third of the cost. And they can realize a lot of the same saving benefits that they could get from solar without needing all the solar panels. So what happens is you put a battery on the home that has no solar panels, and you're able to charge from the grid during the cheap times, the off-peak, keep that power in the battery for the on-peak times when it's most expensive. Now you're running off the battery during the on-peak times, and you don't need solar panels. Like I said, the advantage of that is it's typically about half the cost of solar. A lot of the times, it's only like a 10-year transaction versus a 25-year transaction. So it's a lot better ROI for customers. It's a lot more simple as far as transferring it. But that's something you're going to see more and more, as well as batteries get put onto systems. Now, not to deter you or make you hate solar even more, but what is also now happening, and we're seeing a lot, is people are adding on systems to their old system with a new lease. So now you're going to have 2 leases on one home. One might only have 10 years left and the other has 23 years left. Not ideal, but it is happening because a lot of people were sold solar incorrectly from the beginning. So sort of how we differentiate ourselves is we do everything in-house. So I talked about that one transaction where it was like a salesperson, an install company, what have you. We do it all in-house. So from point of sale through the installation process, even 20 years down the road, that's a Bright Home customer. And then we're certified with APS and SRP, which is only a few companies have that. So Common warranties, usually when you get into a solar system, you can rest assured that normally, even if the installers went out of business and even the leasing company, there's typically 2 other warranties that are at play that give your customer some sort of peace of mind, or your client. One is the manufacturer warranty from panels. So depending when they got solar, a lot of times the panel warranty is 20 to 25 years. So even doesn't matter what happened to the installer, the leasing company, finance, they should have that from the manufacturer as long as the manufacturer is still in business, which, you know, knock on wood, most of them have stayed in business. And then the inverter warranty could be anywhere from 10 to 20, 25 years, just depending who sold it. So you have the panels on the home. You know, I get questions a lot like, how efficient are they? Do you ever have problems? In about just under a decade of us installing solar, I could probably count on 2 hands how many panels we've had to replace. Usually it's from like golf balls, not actual problems. But the inverter that's on the side of the home, that will go out. That is a computer, it's on the side of their home. It's what's running their system. Obviously it gets 120 degrees outside in the summer, and that inverter is exposed. So usually that has a lifespan of 7 to 10 years. For all of our customers, we put a 25-year warranty on it, but it does become part of the manufacturer. Most of the time, it's 10 to 12 years. And that's where you're gonna see problems or anything that comes with your system. So to kind of come down to the last point and talk about why I'm here, more importantly, you know, what happens if the solar company goes out of business? That's really where we've started to see a lot of growth in our business, is other people going out of business, and the people that still have a system, they need somebody to call. So AJF reached out to us, and we've partnered up, which I think it's a tremendous value. Anytime they have a solar system on the home and they don't know what's going on, they call us out for a solar inspection. Now for your clients, it might be $300 to $500, but I'm telling you, it is going to save you thousands and thousands of dollars for them. Like we've ran into systems where it's like, you know, they need $8,000 to $10,000 in repairs, and they were able to negotiate that with the seller and be able to find, you know, a resolution that worked, but they never would have had that leverage had they not done that. And for your client, it's the peace of mind, right? That it's like, hey, they're taking over this random system. Yeah, you get through the leasing and whatever paperwork, that's great, but how do you really know what's going on? Having us go out there through AJF doing a solar inspection is going to give them the peace of mind. We give them a report. We're able to tell them if something's working, if it's not working, and then if it's not working, what an estimated cost would be. But usually, you know, even though a company's, like their company may have went out of business, you know, if they need somebody to service it, we can step in and monitor their system and kind of be that company for them, even if the original installer was gone. I'm going to send that cheat sheet, but kind of the way the order of operations usually goes when you come upon a home with solar and you're saying, okay, like where do I even start? How do I figure out what is what? Usually the first thing you would want to ask the homeowner is, hey, who are you paying your monthly payment to? That's, you know, unless if it's paid off, they're like, we don't have a monthly payment. Okay, that makes it better for your client, but also could be harder to know if it's working or not. But that's the number one question, like who are you paying your monthly payment to? And is it leased or financed? Because a lot of times I'll get hit up with different realtors and they're like, hey, this is a lease. When I look at the paperwork, it's not a lease. So just trying to, you know, that's going to save you a lot of heartache too. Just, is it leased or financed? Who are you making your payment to? They should know that at least. If you know that information, usually, I say usually, you can get a hold of that company if they're still in business to be able to figure out what is going on. You know, a lot of them have, or most, they say they have transfer departments, whether it's call or email to get a hold of them. You know, that's a different story. But on that cheat sheet, I'll provide you the most common solar lenders that are out there for finance and leasing and what their contact information is that we have. Once again, it is subject to change because I don't have everybody's live information, but we put that sheet together. The second thing you can do is if you go out to the electrical panel area or in the garage, you want to find the inverter, okay? The inverter is that stationary piece of equipment on the side of the home. That's what is powering the system. A lot of times, if you open that up or see it, it'll tell you maybe who installed it, or it should have the manufacturer. That's another way to figure out, okay, if we don't, like the system's paid off, we don't know who installed it, how do we know if this thing's working? A lot of times going to that inverter, there should be some sort of light or signal that it's communicating. If that's not on there, you want to take down who's the manufacturer of this. It could be SolarEdge, it could be Tesla. That would be another route to be able to figure out, okay, when was this installed? Who did the work? What records do you all have? And then from that standpoint, worst case scenario, if you don't have any of that information or it's not, then I would say, definitely call for the solar inspection. Get us out there. We can take a deep dive because we'll get up on the roof. We'll check all the connections. We'll have access to all the manufacturers of the inverters. It's very rare we come upon a system where it's like, hey, sorry, we can't tell you anything. Like I said, for $300 to $500 is kind of the average they charge. Definitely well worth it for your client as well as you all to be able to provide them a service. And number two, have negotiating leverage and to know what your client's walking into, because there's sometimes when, a realtor will reach out to me and say, hey, and I'm totally happy for y'all to do this. If you come across the solar, say, hey, is this a good deal for my client? Happy to be like, yeah, that seems pretty reasonable, pretty good, or no, that's like pretty terrible. I'd probably leverage this or ask for that to be able to see if it can make sense. And if not, maybe you do walk away, unfortunately. But your client's not going to be too happy if they take over a terrible situation. Unfortunately, probably some of the blame they're going to come back to you on that, unfortunately. So that was kind of the main things I wanted to talk through today. As far as it comes, solar is ever changing, but right now there is a big push for more leases. And the reason why is because that tax incentive is still good for leasing companies for another 2 years, but for individual homeowners, it's not anymore. But they are coming out with some programs that are better than the standard lease, but those are pretty brand new. So what questions do you have? Anything I can help with from this standpoint? Are you still paying the electric company for power every single month? You're not only losing money, you're investing in someone else's future, not your own. Bright Home Energy has over 400 5-star reviews and over 100 5-star reviews on the BBB. That means real homeowners just like you are already making the switch with quality and peace of mind. We are the preferred solar installer for SolarEdge Technologies in Arizona. Not a title that was given, but a title that was earned through quality, structure, and peace of mind. As a NABCEP certified solar installer and an APS qualified technology installer, your solar installation with Bright Home Energy is not good, it's top tier. So the choice is yours. You can either keep paying your utility company every month, making them rich, or you can make the switch to solar and start investing in your future today. Yeah.
As you're talking, and I have a difficult time already having potential buyers looking at homes that have
Sure.
solar. I'm not hearing anything to say, yeah, go in that direction. I know. I really not.
Sure.
What is your argument for having solar, especially now that's fantastic that the people who own the lease, those companies are
Yeah.
going to do well, but I don't see anything for the consumer.
Yeah, great question. So where we're seeing things shift now, I think solar moving forward, if you're saying, hey, is solar only a really great option? Probably not. If you have storage attached to it, I think it becomes more compelling because what we're starting to see in Arizona is a lot of AI and data centers coming. And yes, we have a very stable grid considering compared to California and Texas, but we were a part of a news story that they interviewed APS on, and they asked APS, they said, do you have enough power to sustain all the AI and data centers that are here and that are slated to come here? And they said no. So what is that going to mean? That's going to mean, and you already see the utility companies shifting to it, is they're shifting to on-peak and off-peak times to where essentially they don't have enough power to be able to power the entire grid. And they're also offering a virtual power plant program to people that have batteries, where they're paying consumers who have a battery anywhere from $700 to $1,000 a year to be able to tap into their battery and use that power for on-peak times in the event they don't have enough power. And so usually the goal, because you have a couple of utility companies here, right? If you're in APS territory, a lot of times that offering was to be able to save them maybe 10 to 20% off their utility bill and lock it in, versus SRP, it's a little, you know, they're cheaper with their rates, but now having a battery, you can still save somebody money. Essentially what the big premise is, like on a lease, is you have two options. You can either stay with your utility company and their rates keep going up and up and up, and you might have blackouts or brownouts at some point and you're just relied on the grid, or you can go solar with a battery and we can lock your payment in for 25 years. And so a lot of people like the predictable payment aspect. It's up to your client to decide, hey, you know, is my risk versus reward, what is that with this system, is what's my potential savings versus, you know, the headache I have to go through to be able to transfer this solar lease. And unfortunately, yeah, you're going to run into probably 30 to 40% of all transactions that were sold not well. It's not a good deal for the consumer, and that's the unfortunate part of it. But you have the other 50 to 60% that, like, they are saving money. They love their solar. It's been working how it was promised, but it all comes back to that initial transaction of who knows what was said, who knows what was promised. But moving forward, that's where I tapped into batteries. Batteries are going to become more and more of a thing, and I think that's the right way to go solar nowadays, to be able to protect against brownouts, different, you know, I guess, distress from the grid, to be able to make sure they're in a good spot. Because not only can it help them save money on a monthly basis, but if the grid goes down and they have a battery, their system will still be working and they'll have power. So, yeah.
Can you explain a little bit more about the battery? So you, like, say you get a Tesla battery.
Yeah.
You install, I think you said around 10,000.
Yep. Yeah, great question. So as far as the Tesla Powerwall 3, that battery is probably the best battery that's out right now, and that provides a whole home backup. So a normal home with 1 to 2 AC units could probably go, you know, during the summer, a couple hours off that charge during the peak times. If you have 2 batteries, that's probably a little bit more ideal. But yeah, the way that works is you can essentially just hook it next to your meter. It's going to charge up power during the off-peak times. Then when it comes, you know, 4 to 7 in APS, or now they have different plans with SRP, it could be 2 to 8 or 5 to 9, they can run off of that battery instead of dipping into the grid at those higher peak rates. So if they have enough storage capacity, usually it's probably 2 batteries, they can play that game to where it's like they can pay 8 or 9 cents a kilowatt hour for all their power, because they charge up their batteries in off-peak. When it's the expensive times, that's 20, 30 cents a kilowatt hour, they're running off their battery instead of off of the grid. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay. Awesome. You have the battery? Okay. Do you have solar too, or just the battery? Solar and the battery. Okay. Okay, awesome. Yeah, for sure. And so that's still an option, you know, solar and a battery, but we're seeing a lot of people just do the battery only component. And now some of the programs, if people still want to purchase the system, there are some options out there to where, like, we just started a new program where in the past, if somebody wanted solar and a battery, you know, maybe it's 30 grand, they have to pay the full 30 grand and then file that tax credit, and hopefully they get it, maybe they don't. Now what we're able to offer consumers is that discount up front. So if somebody wants to finance or pay cash for a system, they only need to pay for 70% of it. A third-party leasing company pays the other 30% and passes that discount through to them. And so for 5 years, it's technically a lease on paper, so that that company can get the tax credit. After that, it's a guaranteed ownership to the consumer, to where they can take over ownership from year 5 on. So there still are opportunities. You know, as far as transferability, that's super easy. Unfortunately, what I see the trend in the solar industry now is a lot of companies and, you know, representatives are just doing the standard lease that's 25 years, and not necessarily a great deal if they're trying to transfer it long term. If they're going to be in the home 20, 25 years, yeah, it can definitely save them money, but if they're going to be transferring it, it can definitely be difficult. So yeah, I'm sorry, I wish I could have better news for you all, but I figured I would just give you the reality of the landscape. That, yeah, it's a challenge. There's no doubt about it. I'm not going to sit up here and say that it's not, because, you know, solar salespeople are telling them, hey, this is going to increase your home value by 10%, which is not true. You know, and then they get into the reality of it that it's like, yeah, it's actually more of a detriment. It might even be a 10% detriment if they're in the wrong situation. If it's paid off, yeah, maybe 1% or 2%, maybe 3%, I don't know. It's whatever anybody's willing to pay for that. But by and large, yep. by and large, it's not a help unless it's completely paid off and they have a battery. So, yeah.
Was there a lot of damage with the storms last month on panels and stuff?
Not that I'm aware of, no. The panels are pretty sturdy. I mean, they're about 55 pounds each. Yeah, for hail, especially in Arizona. If we were in Texas, maybe a different story. But yeah, it's very rare that, like I said, we've been installing for about 8.5 years. Other than a couple golf balls here or there, we really haven't ran into anything that damages the panels. So they're very sturdy. They work. That's usually a small percentage of the problems. It usually always comes down to the electrical piece because of the heat here in Arizona. So, any other questions?
Thank you for speaking with so much transparency.
Yeah? Oh, it is. It's what it is. I'm here to sell you all solar. No, I'm just joking. No, I'm not. Yeah, no, batteries are awesome. So I have my card. I mean, just through AJF, they're wonderful partners of ours. We love working with them. Please, utilize the solar inspection. I'll also give you my information, my card. I'll pass it out. Feel free to shoot me a text. Text is always best first. Countless times a week I get a call. I'm happy to help you out. Like, there's nothing necessarily in it for me other than, trying to build this bridge between solar and the real estate side. What goes around comes around, so if we can be a help for you and your clients, we'd love to be, because we still plan on being around. We want to take care of people whose companies have went out of business, and like I said, here to be a resource for you. I know it's challenging. Wish I had better news for you, but it's at least right? It's having that knowledge is going to help you be more powerful for your client, be able to negotiate a little bit better, and at least have some sort of resource that when you get into a situation where you don't have answers, we can help you find those answers. So,
Where are you sharing that list of like the phone numbers and things?
I'm going to email it to Monica, and then, yep. So, there you go. Get on there. So, cool. Awesome. Thank you all. Appreciate it.